Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Tefe Debi. I'm a consultant psychiatrist and a psychologist. I do videos on mental health and self-improvement education. My goal is to help demystify mental illness and provide you with tools that will help you be your best and live your best. On today's video, I'll be talking about strategies to prevent substance abuse among young people. Adolescents are said to be those who fall into the age bracket between 10 and 19. And then youths are said to be people who fall into the age bracket between 15 and 24. And then young people simply refers to the two groups combined, which is people whose age fall between 10 and 24. And this is a very susceptible group to substance use. Substance abuse simply refers to the use of illicit drugs, the use of alcohol, the use of even prescribed drugs in a manner that it is not prescribed, for the purpose for which it's not supposed to be used, and in a manner that is harmful and dangerous to such individuals. Some adolescents or some young people are more susceptible to the use of drugs compared to their counterparts. Some of the risk factors that increases the chances of a young person using drug include, number one, the presence of drug use in the family. So if there's a family history or some individual in the family that uses drug, a mother, a brother, a sister, a dad, a grandparent, the presence of people who use drug in the family increases the chances of a young person using drug. The second risk factor is the presence of mental health issues. So mental health issues such as impulsive conditions as ADHD, attention deficit disorder, or other impulsive conditions as conduct disorder or positional defiant disorder. All these impulsive conditions increases the risk of an individual using drugs. Also, there are other mental health issues that can increase the risk of a young person using drugs, such as anxiety or depression. A third factor that could increase the risk of a young person using drugs is the issue of social rejection or the issue of low self-esteem. This can impact on the individual such that the person may want to use medication or drugs to compensate for this feeling that they experience. And the fourth and final risk factor that could increase the chance of a young person using drugs is the presence of trauma in that individual's life. And this trauma could be directed towards the individual. So it could be a sexual trauma, it could be a physical trauma that could have happened to that individual maybe at a younger age or just around the time the person starts using. It could also be even the trauma of separation in the family or the trauma of a discord in the family. And sometimes it could be trauma arising from an accident, maybe watching a loved one die. All this kind of traumatic experiences increases the risk of a young person using drugs. There are several problems associated with drug use. Several problems. I'm just going to mention a few. You have problems associated with poor judgment. With the use of drugs, it impairs the judgment of that individual. And poor judgment could involve in decision making. It could also play out while driving. It could play out even in parties, so such as there's increased sexual activities in terms of poor judgment in making decisions in terms of sexual activities, which may lead to unwanted pregnancies, to sexually transmitted disease, to even being sexually molested, when someone is under the influence of drugs. Another thing that it could cause is poor academic performance. So drugs will normally, after a while, will begin to impair and impact on that young person's performance in school. And not just academic performance, it could also lead to poor performance in other areas, like social performance. It could also lead to poor performance in athletic activities, in sport activities. So it leads to generally a poor performance. Another thing that's associated with the use of drug includes your mental health. It could impact on your mental health. Yes, some people take it for ADHD, some people take it for depression and anxiety. The problem is that those are not drugs that you should use for these conditions. If anything, they have the propensity to worsen those conditions. They may start out as if they are addressing it, but then you also run the risk, another problem that you run the risk, apart from the fact that it could cause mental health issues. Case in point, there are particular drugs that when you abuse them, can actually trigger psychosis. So you run the risk of having a mental breakdown as a result of long-term use of these drugs. Another thing that could happen as a result of using this drug is your physical health. It could impact on your physical health. So there are drugs, alcohol could damage your liver over time. Ecstasies, as Molly, drugs that give you the high and the trip, could also affect your heart and your liver. Drugs like cocaine, drugs like amphetamine, drugs like opiates, for opiates and opioids, drugs like tramadol, codeine. All of these drugs are drugs that you can literally overdose on and die. So there is a physical health issue that could come with these drugs. So the impact of drugs on your physical health, on your mental health, and on your mental stability, and also your performance, is so large. So if you look at it, you could say it can impact on your physical health, it can impact on your mental health, it can impact on your social life, it can impact on your occupational life. That's your academics. It can impact on that. And it generally can also impact on your emotions. Drug can make you more emotional and unable to regulate your emotions when you start abusing drugs. And then last but not the least, very important, the abuse of drugs can actually lead to drug dependence. In fact, I'll put this out there, when you start abusing drugs before the age of 14 and 15, you are at far higher risk to becoming dependent on drugs, to becoming so in other words, for dependence, the street word for dependence is to become an addict. So there are so many risk factors, and these are some of the factors I've just mentioned. Knowing all of these challenges that come with drugs, why do young people do drugs? This is what research has found. One of the reasons why people do drugs, young people do drugs, is to fit in. So other people are doing it, so they do it so that they can fit in. Another reason they do it is to feel like grown-ups. Another reason they do it is just to outrightly rebel. So mommy, daddy, guardian said we shouldn't do it, and I'm just going to do it just to damn the consequence. Another reason people do it is to relieve stress. They're going through emotional pain, emotional trauma, and someone offers drugs, or they've heard about drugs and they decide to use it just to address the stress or the challenge that they may be going through. Another reason why people do it is out of experimentation or curiosity. So I just want to know what it's all about. I just want to find out what other people are experiencing from drugs. That's why some people do drugs, and some people do it just to relax and just to have a good time and just to catch fun and to relieve boredom. That's why they do drugs. And then the final reason why they do drugs is because they really don't know the impact it has on their health. And when I talk about their health, I'm not about your health, mental health, your social health, your relationship health, and everything that has to do with you. If you ask me, that's one major reason why people do drugs. They really don't know the impact it can have on the individual. So what are the things you should look for to suspect, or the red flags, if your teen or your young adult is using drugs? Number one, is there an extreme change in the person's behavior, in the person's choice of friends, in the person's eating pattern, in the person's sleeping pattern, in their performance in school? Is there an extreme change? That is a red flag. Another is irresponsible behaviors or poor judgment. Now, if you see that individual beginning to act out in certain ways, or doing things that show that they are not making good judgments, or their behavior generally is irresponsible, then that is another red flag. A third red flag is just outright breaking the rules and socially withdrawn from the family. That should be another thing you should be careful and watch out for. And then the fourth and the final thing you should look out for are their sachets, are their drug containers without illness in the room of your teenage ward or your young adolescent, or just drug paraphernalia around the house, even if they say it belongs to someone else. These are things you should look out for, and there are indications that you should be worried about. But however, the major way to know for certain is to do a drug test. But these are telltale signs, because research has shown that many times parents are like 2 to 4 years behind schedule. What I mean by that is that they find out 2 to 4 years much later after young adults have started using, or teenagers or adolescents have started using. So these are things you can use to identify if your teenager may probably be using drugs. So what are the things as a parent, as a teacher, or more I want to speak to parents, what can you do to help, or a guardian help your teenager or your young adult to stay away from drugs? There are some strategies that could help. Number one, create clear-cut rules and consequences in the home. Clear-cut rules and consequences. So you want to be that person who sets rules, who sets standards, and you follow through with those things that you have set in the home. Another thing is be very supportive to your word, to your child, in the way you speak to them, in the way you act towards them. That creates a safe haven for them to interact with you and talk to you if they have challenges, and that will help you not to be the source of their stress or a traumatic experience for them. And then number 3 is be a good example. So you can't be using drugs yourself, or one that uses drug, and then think that the child will not pick up on that, or your young adult won't pick up on that. That's something you need to pay attention to. Be a good example. You would also want to know some of the activities your teenager is into that will be helpful. The activities in school, activities after school. You want to look into those things. So don't just be a parent or a guardian who just it's not so involved. You need to be more involved. And another thing you need to also know is the friends that your teenager keeps. That helps you, because you see, if they hang around friends that use, they will probably use. So you want to be very, very particular about observing the kind of friends that they keep. And then finally, you also want to look out for track their illnesses. So what I mean by that is that, so a child has a cough and then is on cough syrup. You want to be sure that after the cough is gone, you don't continue using the cough syrup, or they are in pain and they use a particular type of drug, whatever the painkiller may be. You want to track it and just make sure they don't keep taking those drugs after the illness has been resolved. As a teenager, as a young person, you will get pressured to use drugs, from the environment. I mean, it's on social media, it's on mainstream media. Drugs is celebrated, and like I said earlier, many people really, really don't know the danger that is involved in the use of drugs. So this is what I would suggest. These are some strategies, 3 strategies you can employ to help you say no to drugs. Number 1, make an excuse. Come up with an excuse. Plan it. Plan the excuse you always give when you're offered a drug. Tell them something like, maybe I have something to do afterwards, or I will do it much later. Just make an excuse for why you don't want to use. Number 2, you can outrightly tell your friends the reason why they should not do drugs. You haven't watched this video or gone on the internet to get more knowledge, or maybe you stayed in a seminar and you listened to conversation on drugs. You could outrightly just say, this is not good for your health. Yes, it may improve your functioning for a while, it may give you the excitement that you desire for a while, but then in the long run it has remarkable impact on your health, it takes more than it gives. So you could just outrightly be that propagator of not using drugs. And then the third thing is that you can just definitely outrightly firmly say no. So it really depends on your personality. Some people are not so good or comfortable to just say no because they don't want to hurt other person or for whatever reason. But if you are that kind of person, then maybe choose the first two, make an excuse or tell them it's not good for them. But if those two don't work, just outrightly say no. As I bring this video to an end, I hope it's been helpful. I put out so much information in this particular video, probably the longest done so far. But like I said, it's part of the team, it's part of the childhood experience. And drug abuse is a big menace to young people, and it's a very susceptible group. And interestingly, people who sell drugs understand this and know this, so they often target this group between the ages of 10 and 24 to sell drugs. So just in case you're watching this video and you have a young person in your environment, or a young person within your sphere of influence, your child or whatever, that you already know they use drug, then you probably want to have a very honest and open conversation with them, from a place of support, but still from a place of firmness. And you may need to get them to seek professional help so that it does not get out of hand and become extremely debilitating in the future. I hope this has been helpful. Just in case you've not already subscribed to our video, kindly do that. That way you don't get to miss out on any of our weekly videos as they come out. Thank you so much. Remember, let's spread information, let's spread knowledge, and not just spread myths.